For decades, the Bettencourt name was synonymous with elegance, wealth, and power. L'Oréal, the world's largest cosmetics company, was not just a business empire, it was a dynasty. At its heart was Lillian Bettencourt, the glamorous heiress who ruled the beauty world with her charm and fortune. But behind the shimmering façade, a storm was brewing, one that would tear the family apart, shake the French elite to its core, and push Françoise Bettencourt Meyers, Lillian's only daughter, into the international spotlight in the most brutal way imaginable. It began with rumors that Lillian, then in her twilight years, had grown unusually close to a younger man, celebrity photographer François-Marie Bagné. The relationship was odd, eccentric, and to many, suspicious. Over the years, Bagné allegedly received more than $1.4 billion in cash, artworks, and life insurance policies from Lillian. For Françoise, this wasn't just eccentricity, it was exploitation. She feared her mother was being manipulated, her vast fortune siphoned away. But when Françoise confronted her mother, she didn't find sympathy, she found war. The Bettencourt affair exploded into the headlines, accusations of elder abuse, betrayal, greed, and hidden political corruption involving some of France's most powerful figures. It became a public spectacle, a courtroom drama that blurred the line between family dispute and national scandal. As the legal battle raged, private family conversations leaked to the press, revealing a deeply fractured relationship between mother and daughter. Letters were exchanged, some filled with ice-cold formality, others dripping with resentment. For Françoise, it wasn't just about the money, it was about protecting her mother, the family legacy, and the company that carried their name. Yet in the public eye, she was painted as the cold, calculating daughter waging war against her own mother. Tabloids thrived on the drama, spinning the narrative of a daughter willing to humiliate the world's richest woman for control of the fortune. Politicians, journalists, and even the French president were dragged into the mess, as allegations surfaced that political campaigns were secretly funded through this tangled web of gifts and influence. The fallout was devastating. Lillian's once pristine public image crumbled. Françoise, who had once kept herself far from the limelight, became a reluctant public figure, her every move scrutinized. The case eventually ended with Bagné being found guilty of exploiting Lillian's weakness, but the personal cost was irreversible. Mother and daughter never fully reconciled before Lillian's death in 2017. When Lillian passed, Françoise inherited not only the fortune making her the richest woman in the world, but also the scars of a battle that had defined her public life. She had won control of the empire, but at the cost of her family's unity. The L'Oréal legacy was secure in her hands, yet the shadow of the scandal would forever linger. They once stood at the very top, but what happened next? Join the hidden billionaires to uncover her story. Françoise Bettencourt Meyers was born on the 10th of July, 1953, in Neuilly-sur-Seine, one of the wealthiest suburbs of Paris. From the moment she entered the world, her life was shaped by privilege, legacy, and the unshakable presence of the L'Oréal empire. Her mother, Lillian Bettencourt, was the only child of Eugen Schueller, the chemist who founded L'Oréal in 1909 with a single hair dye formula that would evolve into a global cosmetics giant. Her father, André Bettencourt, was a prominent politician, serving as France's Minister of Foreign Affairs and holding other high-ranking government posts. It was an upbringing steeped in wealth, art, and influence. Françoise grew up in a sprawling Parisian mansion filled with priceless paintings, rare sculptures, and the quiet confidence of a family that knew it was untouchable. Yet, for all its beauty, her childhood was anything but ordinary. She was the only child of status that came with both the comfort of undivided attention and the heavy burden of knowing she would one day be the sole heir to one of the world's greatest fortunes. From an early age, Françoise was introspective, reserved, and far more studious than the glamorous circles her family moved in. While her mother thrived in society's glittering salons, Françoise preferred solitude, burying herself in literature, music, and theology. She developed a lifelong passion for the Bible not merely as a work of faith, but as a subject for deep intellectual study. This scholarly bent made her stand apart from the rest of her jet-set peers, who were often more concerned with yachts and couture gowns. Her family life was not without shadows. Her father's political career was controversial, as whispers of his connections to pro-Nazi groups during World War II lingered for decades, even after his post-war rehabilitation. Françoise grew up aware that the Bettencourt name carried as much weight in scandal as it did in power, and a duality that would shape how she approached life in the public eye. Françoise's education reflected her intellectual curiosity. She attended elite French institutions, mastering philosophy, music, and classical literature. Her worldview was shaped by an unusual combination of aristocratic refinement and spiritual introspection. She wasn't the kind of heiress seen on the covers of society magazines. She rarely sought attention, choosing instead to publish works on Greek mythology and religious commentary. By the time she reached adulthood, Françoise had already internalized the idea that her destiny was not her own, it was tied to the L'Oréal legacy. She knew she would one day have to step into the role of protector, not just of the family fortune, but of its reputation. What she couldn't foresee was that her greatest battle wouldn't be against corporate competitors, but against forces inside her own home. The seeds of that future conflict were quietly sown in her youth. She saw firsthand the dynamic between her charming, socially magnetic mother and the powerful men who orbited her. Lilliane's generosity was legendary, but so was her vulnerability to flattery. For years, Françoise observed with growing unease how easily her mother was swayed by friends, advisors, and socialites. Françoise's personal life was far less publicized than her parents'. In 1984, she married Jean-Pierre Meyers, the grandson of a rabbi who died in Auschwitz. This union was not without controversy. Françoise's grandfather, Eugen Schuler, had been accused of sympathizing with Nazi ideology during the war. The marriage was a symbolic reconciliation of two vastly different legacies, one marred by wartime collaboration, the other by persecution. Together, Françoise and Jean-Pierre had two sons, reinforcing her desire to preserve the Bettencourt legacy for the next generation. Though she inherited vast wealth early through family holdings, Françoise lived in relative privacy for decades, focusing on her children, her writing, and her faith. The public knew her primarily as the quiet daughter of the world's richest woman, a scholar who kept far away from the gossip pages. But deep down, she knew that being a Bettencourt meant living in the shadow of both immense fortune and immense risk. The tranquility of her carefully protected world would begin to crumble in the early 2000s. Her mother's aging health, combined with a growing dependence on new and questionable friendships, stirred Françoise's protective instincts. She had been raised to think like a custodian of the empire, but nothing in her upbringing had prepared her for the very public, very bitter war that was about to erupt. And when it did, it would not only pit her against a man she believed was exploiting her mother, it would pit her against her mother herself. For most heirs to multi-billion-dollar empires, the path to influence is a carefully choreographed dance-in, an early appointment to the board, a slow climb through executive ranks, and eventually the coronation as the family's corporate guardian. But for Françoise Bettencourt Meyers, the climb to power was anything but linear. It was quiet, deliberate, and almost reluctant until circumstances forced her hand. When she first joined the Laurel Board in 1997, Françoise was 44 years old, with no pressing need to work and no desire for public recognition. She entered not as a glamorous corporate figurehead, but as the intellectual, detail-oriented daughter who had been groomed to safeguard the family's 33% stake in the cosmetics giant. Her approach was analytical and understated. While others thrived on quarterly spotlights and glossy PR campaigns, she spent her time dissecting market reports, ensuring the family's voting power remained unshakable. Under her quiet watch, L'Oréal grew into an even greater force. The company expanded aggressively into emerging markets, acquiring luxury brands like Yves Saint Laurent Beauty and Kiehl's, and strengthening its hold in skincare, makeup, and hair care across more than 130 countries. While Françoise was not the public architect of these moves, her presence on the board ensured that family influence remained the heartbeat of the company's strategic direction. But Françoise's climb was never about personal ambition. Her true challenge and the crucible that would define her as a power figure came not from the competition in the beauty industry, but from the internal unraveling of her own family. In 2007, whispers about her mother's increasingly extravagant gifts to Françoise Marie Bagné turned into hard numbers. Artwork worth hundreds of millions, life insurance policies totaling over €1 billion, and endless cash transfers. It was wealth being handed over at a pace that alarmed even the most indulgent of family observers. For Françoise, this wasn't about greed. It was about stewardship. The Bettencourt fortune was not simply personal, it was tied to L'Oréal's stability, to shareholder confidence, and to the legacy of a company her grandfather had built from a tiny Parisian laboratory. If that fortune bled away under questionable circumstances, it wouldn't just be a family embarrassment, it could undermine decades of empire building. She decided to act, filing a criminal complaint accusing Bagné of exploiting her mother's mental weakness for personal gain. In doing so, Françoise crossed a line from private protector to public warrior. The lawsuit sparked what French media would dub l'affaire Bettencourt, a scandal that would stretch for years, ensnaring politicians, business leaders, and even the sitting French president. The battle was brutal. Bagné's defense painted Françoise as a controlling daughter trying to seize power prematurely. Leaked audio recordings made by Liliane's butler exposed private family conversations, turning the Bettencourt home into a theater for the press. Some recordings hinted at possible illegal political donations to Nicolas Sarkozy's campaign, adding a volatile political dimension to the family feud. While Françoise never sought the limelight, the trial forced her into it. She became the face of one of the most sensational inheritance disputes in modern history. In the court of public opinion, some saw her as the dutiful daughter protecting her mother from a manipulative opportunist. Others saw a cold strategist securing her position as the future richest woman in the world. The legal victory came slowly but decisively. In 2015, Bagné was convicted of abuse of weakness and sentenced to prison, though the term was later reduced. By then, Liliane had been declared mentally unfit to manage her affairs, and Françoise assumed full control of the family's financial interests. By the time Liliane passed away in 2017, Françoise had already been managing the fortune for years. Her inheritance, estimated at over $40 billion, instantly made her the richest woman alive, a title she still holds. But unlike the flashy billionaires of Silicon Valley or the high society heiresses who flaunt their fortunes, Françoise remained almost reclusive. Her climb to power wasn't marked by champagne toasts and cover shoots. It was defined by courtrooms, legal filings, and the unwavering belief that she had a duty to protect what her grandfather had built. And while she had secured control over the empire, she had also inherited the full weight of its controversies, scars, and expectations. In the end, Françoise had not so much climbed to power as she had been thrust into it, forged by a battle she never wanted but refused to lose. Her next challenge would not be about fighting for the family fortune, it would be about surviving the storm of scrutiny and scandal that came with it. When the verdict in the Bettencourt affair was finally delivered, Françoise Bettencourt Meyers had won on paper. Françoise Marie Bagné had been found guilty of exploiting her mother's vulnerability, political figures were embarrassed, and the siphoning of billions from the family fortune had been stopped. But in reality, there were no true victors, only survivors. The cost of this victory was staggering. The public feud between Françoise and her mother had been laid bare for years, dissected in front-page headlines and gossip columns. Every leaked conversation, every icy exchange between mother and daughter had been broadcast to millions. Even in polite Parisian society, where scandal is often met with a knowing shrug, the Bettencourt saga was viewed as something darker, more tragic. Liliane's health declined rapidly during the legal war. The woman who had once been the elegant face of L'Oréal's legacy was now shielded from public view, declared mentally unfit to handle her own affairs. For Françoise, the win felt hollow. She had achieved what she set out to do, protect her mother and the family's stake in L'Oréal, but it came at the price of any remaining warmth between them. Their relationship never fully recovered, and when Lillian died in 2017, it was without the reconciliation many had hoped for. The scandal also brought Françoise something she never wanted: fame. She became overnight one of the most recognizable names in France, not for her scholarship, her philanthropy, or her business acumen, but for being the daughter who took her own mother to court. It didn't matter that she was now the richest woman in the world. To many, her wealth was stained by the ugliness of the legal fight. Her public image was polarizing. Supporters admired her courage in standing up to a man who had manipulated one of the world's most powerful women. Critics accused her of greed, of seeking control long before her mother's time was up. French media was relentless, publishing invasive profiles that speculated about her private life, her marriage, even her faith. The personal toll was immense. Françoise withdrew even further from the public eye, avoiding interviews and refusing to attend high-profile events unless absolutely necessary for L'Oréal. She found herself living under a kind of voluntary house arrest, surrounded by tight security, shielding herself and her family from both real threats and the constant gaze of paparazzi. Even within the company, the scandal had ripple effects. L'Oréal's public relations teams had to work overtime to distance the brand from the courtroom drama. Shareholders worried about stability, despite the fact that the company's performance remained strong. Françoise bore the dual responsibility of reassuring the markets while also managing her own battered reputation. The trial had also dredged up deeper family wounds, old political skeletons from her father's past, wartime controversies involving her grandfather, and the persistent whispers that the Bettencourt wealth had always been as much a product of influence as of innovation. These historical shadows, combined with the present scandal, painted a portrait of a dynasty both dazzling and dangerous. And yet, Françoise did not crumble under the weight of it all. She responded to the chaos with a kind of quiet defiance. While many billionaires in her position might have gone on a charm offensive, she chose silence. No tell-all interviews, no public displays of contrition or triumph. Instead, she let her actions speak, channeling her focus into L'Oréal's long-term stability, expanding philanthropic initiatives, and reinforcing the company's commitment to ethical practices. But the scars were there, even if she never spoke about them. The Bettencourt affair had taken her private life and turned it into a cautionary tale about money, trust, and family loyalty. She had learned firsthand that fortune attracts not just admiration, but predators, and she understood now, more than ever, that the price of fame, especially unwanted fame, was the loss of the anonymity she had valued her entire life. In the end, Françoise emerged from the storm wealthier, more powerful, and more guarded than ever. But the cost had been measured not in euros, but in relationships, peace of mind, and the ability to ever live without looking over her shoulder. The next chapter of her life would answer one question. After surviving one of the most sensational scandals in French history, would she remain in the fight, or would she retreat entirely from the world that had so brutally exposed her? After the tumultuous legal battles and public scrutiny that consumed much of her mother's later years, Françoise Bettencourt Meyers faced a new reality, steering the vast L'Oréal empire while living with the emotional and social fallout of one of the most sensational family scandals of the century. But unlike many who might retreat or falter under such pressure, Françoise quietly embraced her role as the sole guardian of a multi-generational legacy and did so with remarkable discretion. The death of Lillian Bettencourt in 2017 marked a solemn turning point. Françoise inherited an estimated fortune surpassing $70 billion, instantly becoming the richest woman on the planet. Yet she avoided the typical billionaire spotlight. No extravagant displays of wealth, no lavish parties broadcast on social media, and no flashy acquisitions to make headlines. Instead, she chose a path of calculated humility, focusing her efforts on protecting and growing the company that carried her family name. Behind the scenes, Françoise has been deeply involved in L'Oréal's strategic vision. She reinforced the company's commitment to innovation, sustainability, and ethical business practices, areas critical to maintaining brand trust in a world increasingly focused on corporate responsibility. Her leadership style is described by insiders as methodical and prudent, emphasizing long-term stability over short-term gains. Though Françoise rarely makes public appearances, she is known for her hands-on approach. She personally oversees L'Oréal's philanthropic foundation, which supports scientific research, education, and cultural projects in France and worldwide. This philanthropic work aligns with her deeply rooted intellectual and spiritual values, reflecting a desire to give back in meaningful ways far removed from the glamour of her family's wealth. Her private life remains intensely guarded. Françoise resides in Paris with her husband, Jean-Pierre Meyers, and their two sons, away from the glare of the press. She prioritizes family above all, determined to shield her children from the turbulent legacy that marked her own upbringing. Reports suggest she instills in them a strong sense of ethics, responsibility, and humility traits she believes are essential for the next generation of the Bettencourt dynasty. Despite her preference for privacy, Françoise has not shied away from taking firm action when necessary. She has maintained a controlling interest in L'Oréal, navigating boardroom politics with quiet authority and securing the company's independence amid the pressures of globalization and market consolidation. Her resolve to preserve the family's influence is unwavering. Publicly, Françoise has avoided sensationalism, but that does not mean she is without influence. She quietly wields power in French society and the global business world, appearing occasionally at high-profile events, but always on her own terms. Her reputation today is that of a woman who has weathered scandal, heartbreak, and scrutiny, and emerged not just unbroken but strengthened. However, the shadow of the Bettencourt affair still lingers. The bitter public disputes, the media storm, and the very public exposure of family rifts serve as a constant reminder of the fragility behind vast wealth. Françoise's story is a testament to the costs of power, where protecting a legacy often means sacrificing personal peace. For many, her journey is one of remarkable resilience, a daughter who took control not out of greed, but out of necessity, a guardian of one of the world's most iconic companies who prefers action to accolades, a billionaire who values privacy and principle above public adulation. They once stood at the very top, but what happened next? Join the hidden billionaires to uncover the final chapters of Françoise Bettencourt Meyers' story. For Françoise Bettencourt Meyers, family is more than bloodline. It is the living, breathing continuation of a legacy that has survived wars, scandals, and the relentless pressures of wealth. As the only child of Liliane Bettencourt and the heiress to one of the world's largest fortunes, Françoise has made it her mission not just to preserve the empire, but to nurture the next generation that will carry it forward. She and her husband, Jean-Pierre Meyers, have two sons, who represent the future of the Bettencourt lineage. Raised with a strong emphasis on education, ethics, and responsibility, her children have been shielded as much as possible from the public eye and the burdens that come with their heritage. Françoise is determined that their upbringing be rooted in humility and service rather than entitlement. The marriage between Françoise and Jean-Pierre is itself a story of bridging histories and healing old wounds. Jean-Pierre's grandfather was a rabbi who perished in Auschwitz during the Holocaust, a painful chapter that starkly contrasts with Françoise's grandfather, Judenschuller's controversial past linked to far-right affiliations during World War II. Their union symbolizes a poignant reconciliation, a conscious choice to move beyond the shadows of history toward a legacy defined by resilience and unity. While Françoise has remained intensely private about her family life, it is known that the couple shares deep commitments to philanthropy and cultural preservation. Through the Bettencourt Schuler Foundation, which she actively oversees, significant resources are dedicated to supporting scientific research, arts, and education. The foundation reflects the family's desire to use their wealth not just for business success, but to contribute meaningfully to society. Despite the immense wealth and influence she wields, Françoise has avoided the trappings of extravagant luxury. Unlike many billionaires who flaunt their fortunes, she lives relatively modestly, surrounded by family and intellectual pursuits. Her children are believed to be educated in elite institutions, but Françoise insists on instilling values that prioritize character over status. Looking to the future, Françoise faces critical decisions about succession and stewardship of the family empire. She has publicly emphasized the importance of preparing her sons to responsibly inherit the family's vast interests while maintaining the principles of discretion and diligence that have defined her tenure. The family's internal harmony appears cautiously maintained, especially after the bruising public disputes of the past. Françoise seems determined to protect her children from repeating the bitter conflicts that engulfed her own relationship with her mother. In this, she balances the weight of legacy with the hope for a more private, stable family future. As for Laurel, Françoise's heirs stand poised to inherit not only extraordinary wealth, but also the responsibility of stewarding a brand synonymous with beauty, innovation, and global influence. Whether they will choose to take the helm personally or entrust the company to external leadership remains a question the public watches closely. Françoise Bettencourt Meyers' legacy, therefore, is not only the billions she commands, but also the family she protects the next generation, poised to write the future chapters of the Bettencourt story. Françoise Bettencourt Meyers stands today as one of the most powerful custodians of wealth and influence in the world, yet her legacy transcends mere numbers. The L'Oréal empire she inherited and now oversees is not just a cosmetics giant, but a symbol of innovation, resilience, and the complex interplay between family, business, and society. Her stewardship of the family fortune has helped secure L'Oréal's place at the forefront of the beauty industry for generations to come. Under her watch, the company has embraced new technologies and sustainable practices, responding to changing consumer values without sacrificing its core identity. This evolution ensures that the brand remains not only profitable, but culturally relevant in a fast-changing world. Historians and business experts alike recognize François' unique role in transforming what could have been a fragile inheritance into a stable, future-proof dynasty. Unlike many heirs who squander their fortunes or let family empires crumble under internal strife, she has maintained control with remarkable poise, turning scandal into a lesson in resilience. Her legacy also extends beyond business. Through the Bettencourt Schuler Foundation, she has championed scientific research and the arts, funding initiatives that have tangible impacts on health, culture, and education. Universities and institutes funded by the foundation carry her family's name, cementing a philanthropic footprint that complements the corporate one. Yet, perhaps the most lasting legacy Françoise leaves is the cautionary tale embedded in her family's history. The public battles, the media storm, and the personal betrayals all serve as stark reminders of the vulnerabilities that come with vast wealth. Future generations and observers worldwide have learned from her story that managing fortune requires not just acumen, but vigilance, empathy, and a commitment to protecting both people and principles. In the eyes of many, Françoise Bettencourt Meyers embodies a new kind of billionaire archetype, one that values discretion over flashiness, substance over spectacle. Her life challenges the stereotypes of heiresses as socialites or spendthrifts, presenting instead a figure of quiet strength, intellectual depth, and steely resolve. Media retrospectives often contrast her reserved demeanor with the glitz and drama of other billionaire families, portraying her as an emblem of dignity in an age of tabloid excess. Analysts debate whether her legacy will be that of an inspirational icon who saved a dynasty or a cautionary figure who paid dearly for power. In the 10 to 20 years since the Bettencourt affair, the public's view has softened, with growing appreciation for the complexity of her role as both daughter and heiress. Her story is now taught in business schools as an example of crisis management, inheritance law, and the intertwining of family dynamics with corporate governance. Ultimately, François' legacy is still unfolding. The empire she controls will continue to influence beauty standards, cultural trends, and philanthropic efforts worldwide. And while the shadows of scandal will never fully disappear, her stewardship has ensured that the Bettencourt name remains a beacon of power if one tempered by hard-earned wisdom. Françoise Bettencourt Meyers' life is a story of contrasts, wealth and vulnerability, public scrutiny and private resilience, inherited power and personal sacrifice. From the glittering heights of one of the world's greatest fortunes to the dark trenches of family conflict and legal battles, her journey reveals the complex human cost behind the billion-dollar empire. She inherited not just vast wealth, but a legacy steeped in history, controversy, and expectation. As the sole heir to Laurel, she has faced challenges few can imagine, fighting to protect her mother, navigating ruthless legal battles, and managing the public's relentless gaze. Yet, through it all, she has maintained a steely determination to preserve what her family built, choosing discretion and duty over fame and excess. Françoise's story teaches us that ambition, no matter how vast, comes with a price. The fallout of power struggles can fracture even the strongest bonds, leaving scars that money cannot heal. But it also shows the strength required to face those storms, to emerge from scandal not defeated but fortified, ready to lead with quiet authority. In the end, Françoise Bettencourt Meyers is neither a perfect heroine nor a villain of inheritance drama. She is a woman shaped by history and circumstance, navigating the treacherous intersection of family and fortune with grace and resolve. Her legacy is a powerful reminder. Behind every headline about billionaires lie untold stories of loyalty, betrayal, and survival. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe and stay tuned for more hidden truths from the world's richest